Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. At midnight, the next chapter of World of Warcraft of the World Soul Saga is looking to do a fairly major revamp to the foundation of WoW that we know today. And WoW as a game has been really shaped and molded to some degree by some of the different tools the players use. And I'm not talking about like class guides that you read online or anything like that, but really in-game tools as additions to the game in order to give you more information. Things like add-ons and things like weak auras, for instance, is something that shaped the way the classes and mechanics and raids and all these other features have evolved over time. As you're creating more sophisticated and difficult mechanics, players create tools in order to be able to bypass mechanics, which means the Blizzard got to up the ante and the players find ways to make solutions for those mechanics and on and on and on. It's like a race of Blizzard trying to make fights harder while players try to find ways to make fights easier, as well as how to play their classes even easier with tracking all those basic procs and abilities. However, they're looking to do a pretty big reset for midnight, and potentially, a rumor claims, earlier than expected. We already knew that a big add-on ban/restriction was going to be coming out at some point in the future, but rumors are suggesting this actually might be happening as soon as midnight launches, which would be much earlier than any of us would have expected. So for today's video, I wanted to go over what this rumor would mean for the next chapter of World of Warcraft and how that could impact the way that you play your class, raid, do dungeons, and literally everything when it comes to WoW going forward. As always, if you guys want to see more regular content updates regarding Midnight or War Within, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. Now, the main thing to note here is, for now, this is just a rumor, but apparently a person who knows a guy who runs one of those add-ons that is in communication with Blizz regarding the restrictions coming out, heard it down the grapevine that apparently these restrictions might be coming out as early as launch of Midnight, where a lot of us thought that was going to be way down the line, like maybe midway through Midnight, but might be coming out a lot sooner expected. But potentially this could either be both scary, but at the same time, maybe even exciting to some degree. But before we dive into like panicking about this issue, I first wanted to ask the question and try to answer, what does the set of add-on bans or add-on restrictions even mean for the community and the game going forward? Because 90% of add-ons that players use today, and even weak auras or other game modifiers, are still going to be allowed. If you have an add-on that maybe tracks all the different open world activities and all these quests, like when you zoom out, you can see all your dailies and weeklies and everything that you should be doing. If you just want to have like an easier time managing all of those objectives in your map, because this looks like an absolute mess, so an add-on cleaning all this up, still going to be allowed. Add-ons that help you track potentially some of the different collectibles on your character, like Narcissus or any of the other add-ons that track different transmogs for you to go after, track different mounts, pets, really anything that you can collect in WoW, and there's an add-on to manage those collectibles, you'll still be able to have those. If you want an add-on that completely revamps UI in like a very, very wild way to just look like another game entirely, or another MMO, or anything like that, anything that's just fun customization options, you will be able to keep those. So any add-ons that are there for fun, professions, maybe auction house management, or just anything that's a huge quality of life adjustment for the base game, majority of those are still going to be in the game even after the set of changes. All of those are still going to be allowed. The only add-ons that are going to be restricted are anything that deals with combat, class trackers, some proc tracking of things, boss managing add-ons, so add-ons that will tell you boss timers and when abilities are about to come out, or potentially even PvP add-ons, because those are very much involved around player performance. So anything that's combat performance based, majority of those are on the chopping block. However, some combat add-ons are at this point at the core of the game itself, like they're almost baked into the foundation. None of these things were part of the game initially, but over the years, they've really just become solidified as almost like a core item that you absolutely need, otherwise you can't function. So something must be done on a foundational level. And that's at the core as part of their big plan for WoW in Midnight, as well as set up the rest of the game so it has somewhere to grow for the next 20 years onwards. One of the major goals when it comes to Midnight, and we'll see how well they do it as we get into the alpha and the beta, but they want to find a way to make WoW less reliant on add-ons in order to even be functional or playable, especially when it comes to playing your class well or potentially completing raids and dungeons at a higher level. Like, I really do not know a single person that loves the idea of having to download a package of 20 to 30 different WeCores just to be able to start playing their class at a somewhat reasonable level. So from that perspective, this does seem kind of like a reasonable change going forward. Boss mechanics need to be made a lot more clear without the need of any specific add-ons, and that you should be able to just see with your eyes what is happening on your screen and tell exactly what we need to do and where you need to go without having 20 different alerts popping up on your screen telling you otherwise. Mechanics should also give players ample time to react, and that is something they're looking to change compared to some of the encounters where players sometimes have like a 0.5 second time before a mechanic just one-shots you unless you do it correctly. And enemies in dungeons should not have 12 million different casts for you to interrupt either, so they're looking to revamp all of this all together heading into the next expansion. And I think we actually saw an example of what they're looking to do with the dungeon Ikadom Aldani, which is one of the players' fan favorite for this season of Mythic Plus. It is rather easy and very straightforward. You don't have a million different interrupts that all need to go off. There's like ritualist enemies, as well as later down the line there are like bigger versions of those ritualists that have a very scary cast, but outside of that, everything else can be crowd controlled or dealt with in other ways. And even though the bosses are very straightforward, which is a nice change of pace, because some bosses feels like they designed them just to have mechanics for the sake of mechanics in a way. And many classes are also expected to become simpler to play or potentially even streamlined. And while there's not a lot of classes that are just overly complex and overly designed, they are a handful of few, and I feel like every one of us knows at least one spec that just is too overly engineered. My example would be Outrogue, and even though it's my favorite, it's my main, it's so much fun. Like when I put a guide together and I'm just thinking to myself, like, how is a new player supposed to learn this? There's so many different buffs to keep track of and procs and rotational changes based on what buff you have. It's just too much. So I feel like any simplification or streamlining is probably a welcome addition for a handful of specs that really do deserve it. And while they are looking to simplify certain mechanics, some add-ons are just at the core of the game itself, and they've been with WoW for a very long time, and those add-ons have actually fundamentally have changed how we play the game for the rest of our lives. So some of those add-ons, they're actually looking to make baseline as part of the game UI. As part of the big fundamental UI changes, they're looking to make a bunch of adjustments, starting with character nameplates. So, like when you're running a dungeon and you see those health bars above their heads, those are the plates they're looking to change. And that's one of the first few things that players usually go to for add-ons to completely revamp, to give players even more information. But what they're looking to do is give players the ability to see more buffs and debuffs on enemy targets. Like if you want to track your dots on a target to make sure everybody has the blades and Shadowward Pains on them, you should be able to do so easily. Players should have more information regarding crowd control on those enemies. Mob buffs if something needs to be purged or removed or de-enraged in order to make enemies less effective in combat. And also those plates, those nameplates above their heads should also show dangerous casts and be highlighted above all. Like some enemies are going to cast, let's say, Fireball at a single target. It does no damage, but then they do like a Fireball volley, and as a dangerous cast, it's going to hit everybody. Those are the casts that need to be interrupted, and them adding stuff like this is going to be one of those steps towards a good change that we all really needed for a very long time. They're also adding baseline damage meters. All of us use some sort of a form of damage tracker, usually details, but they're looking to add their own version. And while we haven't seen the site of what that will look like just yet, they do say that it's going to be more accurate than details because it's using their own internal server data for all the damage calculations and combat logging. So hopefully it should at least give players a little bit more detailed information. Boss alerts is also a big one. They're looking to actually kind of revamp by simplifying and streamlining boss mechanics a little, while also adding an in-game tracker that shows you accurately when enemy abilities are about to come up, which includes combat messages such as when enemies use a charge or a big cleave AoE ability, or if let's say a player is marked specifically with a mechanic, which sometimes can get really difficult to see without clear markers. Combat timeline will also show you exactly when those abilities are coming out. So if you're a class that's very cooldown based, like maybe as a healer, you are waiting for a big raid-wide mechanic, you need to know when the mechanic's coming out. Now you'll be able to see exactly when to pop your, I don't know, healing tide totem as a shaman when the raid is about to take a big burst of damage. And then they're also doing a bunch of cool stuff with the cooldown manager and the WoW base UI. Like as part of the base UI, one of the things you'll notice is your normal like class resources. Like if you play Arcane Mage, you gotta track arcane charges, but normally they're kind of stuck to your character player frame and you can't really move it anywhere. Well, they'll actually allow you to have like a special bar for personal resources and be able to move it anywhere you want to. So that's going to be yet another one of those functionality changes where you'll be able to track your resources a little bit more freely. And they're also looking to add other changes such as anything for your cooldown manager. From the utility cooldowns to major cooldowns, all those major things that you will normally track, they're looking to give you even more customization for those than before. And actually, a lot of those changes are already part of the patch 11.2.5, which you can preview over on the PTR, which is coming out sometime soon. Allowing you to customize which cooldowns show up where, and allow you to add buff states to different selected areas of your UI. So if, let's say, you're a shaman and you want to put all your totems in one single utility cooldown bar, you will be able to do so. And maybe you want to put other abilities, offensive powers that are not rotational, so not like lightning bolt and lava burst or things like that don't have a cooldown. You can remove those out and keep all the major stuff in there instead, like Stormkeeper and even maybe Ascendance or other cooldowns like that. You also will be able to customize what goes in your bars and what is also tracked in your track buffs as well. And also looking to add sound alerts, because a lot of players use weak auras with sounds in order to tell them when a proc is up. Not only do you have the visual counterpart, but an auditory one. So it's also really good that they are looking to add those features in there as well. However, like I said at the very beginning, it is still a rumor whether add-ons are receiving some restrictions early on into midnight or not, and we'll have a better idea of what is going to be available and playable and usable. However, the ramifications for this set of changes could be massive, either in a good way or a bad way, and for now I'm just going to speak about it in more neutral terms, but this is definitely going to have a huge impact on, let's say, the world first race, because a lot of the guys there, they are pushing some of the highest end game content and try to defeat the bosses before anybody else. And a lot of the tools they use are very sophisticated to help them progress through the content and help them make data-driven decisions. But I'm wondering, are these fights actually going to be made easier to see and easier to understand? It's going to be interesting to see how they are able to deal with this type of changes if they were to come out, because this trickles down to everybody else. The top tier players and how they're able to defeat some of those fights will also determine how the rest of the players that are trying to kill mythic bosses and even heroic bosses, how they end up advancing and progressing through those encounters with all this add-on changes if the rumor proves to be true. This also could have a huge ramification for how classes are designed and adjusted going forward, because if they are looking to make simplifications and streamlining, technically you'll be bringing down this skill ceiling, but also potentially raising this skill floor for so many different classes out there. And it'll be very interesting to see how your average player adapts to these, and I wonder if that'll potentially could, with classes becoming more simple, could possibly improve the single button rotation based builds for some of the more casual in the community. However, majority of these questions will likely get an answer for during the early days of the alpha or potentially into the beta of midnight, once we are properly there to test out all of the endgame dungeons and content and some of the fights and how they work and how classes work within those environments. So at the moment, it's a game of wait to see exactly what happens. But with that being said, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like, as I would very much appreciate it. Also, be sure to let me know in the comments down below, what are your thoughts on them potentially doing a restriction of add-ons early into midnight? Are you excited or are you worried? And tell me exactly how would you feel if they were to just cut off all those combat add-ons as soon as midnight launches? So let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.